What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports on the SEC channel here at the Voice of College Football. Time for our Week 8 power rankings in the SEC. And it's interesting in the SEC because after a few weeks, it seemed like the entire conference almost was upside down. It wasn't anything like we expected in the preseason. And now that we've played a few more games, we've gotten to the halfway point, a little over the halfway point for some teams. It's starting to look more like we thought it was going to look. You know, Texas A&M looked like they were going to be terrible. Now they look like a good team, one of the better teams in the conference. A team like Arkansas looked like they might have a chance to win the SEC West. Now all of a sudden they're back towards the middle of the pack. So it's starting to look a little bit more like we expected it to look, and it will be very interesting to see what happens the second half of the season. Still some surprises, still some things that are different than what we expected. But let's get into it here, starting at the bottom. Vanderbilt clearly number 14 for me at 2-5, and Missouri right above them at 3-4. These are the worst two teams in the conference. South Carolina, I think they're in that same boat, really. South Carolina, Missouri, Vanderbilt, those are your worst three teams in the SEC. I think there's a pretty big gap between Mississippi State and South Carolina. That bottom tier is it's been those three teams now for several weeks. South Carolina almost losing to Vanderbilt. They come back to win that game. So these teams are pretty even to me, and they're at the bottom. The surprise there, I think, is Missouri. I was not one of those that thought Missouri was a top 25 team or a team that could challenge in the SEC East, but I thought they would be decent. You know, I thought they would be a 7-5 type team. It hasn't looked that way so far. They have been a mess this year. Mississippi State comes in at number 11. They are 3-3. Unfortunately for the Bulldogs, they had to feel the wrath of Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Coming off of that tough loss, you knew Alabama was going to come out and they were going to be firing on all cylinders. They did. Mississippi State coming off of a huge win over Texas A&M. Then they go into a bye week. Maybe they had rather just played a game that week instead of having a bye week. The 2 weeks to prepare for Alabama didn't seem to do them much good. But again, this was just a terrible time to have to play Alabama. The Alabama defense really fired up, played maybe their best game of the year so far. And it was just a tough one for Mississippi State. But I still think that this team is above these other three teams. They're capable of beating Texas A&M, and they almost came back to beat LSU. So this is still a quality team in Mississippi State, playing good defense, and the offense still not quite where it needs to be. But again, not a bad team. All right, 6 through 10. We go to that next kind of tier of teams. We have Tennessee at 10, Arkansas 9, Florida at 8, LSU at number 7. I will reveal number 6 in just a second. Tennessee lost to Ole Miss, but they still showed that they're a pretty good team. Tennessee is a lot better than I thought they would be this year. Josh Heupel has come in there, and he's gotten that offense going. Hendon Hooker, since he came in at quarterback, has played really well for them. They had a chance. Of course, Hooker went down with the injury, but they still had a chance to win this game late when Milton came in. Had a pass that hit the receiver right in the hands in the end zone that would have won the game. So they had an opportunity to beat Ole Miss, which would have been a huge win. Obviously, the fans and everything, that's a different story. Just embarrassing there for Tennessee. But as far as the football team goes, they're playing pretty good football, and 4-3, I think you got to be happy with that if you're a Vols fan. Arkansas at number 9, their third loss in a row. Had opportunities against Auburn, but the Tigers just made the plays. Arkansas did not in that second half, especially late in the second half. The fumble for the touchdown, that really, I think, kind of turned the momentum and turned this game in favor of Auburn. That was a tough one for Arkansas. All three of their losses have been tough losses. Florida there at number 8, losing to LSU. That was a big surprise. LSU showing what they're capable of. This is still a talented team, and they got it done against Florida. That was a big surprise. I think Florida was a 10 or 11 point favorite in this game. So LSU now back up to number 7 in the power rankings. Of course, the big news for LSU is Ed Orgeron is going to be gone after this season, going to finish out the season for the Tigers, and they'll be playing for him, I guess. It's a team that is dealing with so many injuries, so many guys out, and you just don't know. They've been a disappointment. Let's just be honest here. They've been a disappointment. But if they had stayed healthy, who knows? Maybe LSU would have been in a better position. Maybe they would have maybe one loss at this point and still be in that conversation in the SEC. But they do have 3 losses. Number 6 is Texas A&M. I got the Aggies in a tier a little bit above these teams. Texas A&M and the number 5 team kind of grouped together. I'll show you the 5 team in just a second. But Texas A&M has shown what they're capable of the last couple of weeks, of course, upsetting Alabama. With all the injuries they had, with Zach Calzada coming in at quarterback, it just took a little bit of time to get things figured out. Now that they have done that, A&M looks like a really good team, a team that has a chance to be a top 15 team this season, maybe even a top 10 team if they can continue to win. But still, that win over Alabama, that is what has propelled the Aggies all the way up to number 6. At one point, they were, 11 in our power rankings after 2 losses in a row. But they have bounced back, and they are looking good right now. And then Auburn, the other team that I put in that group with Texas A&M, they are 5-2. A team that I think a lot of people are underrating. This is a quality football team. You look at their 2 losses. They lost on the road to Penn State by 1 possession, and then they lose to Georgia, who everyone's losing to Georgia. Now they have a win on the road at LSU, a win on the road at Arkansas, 2 quality wins. This is a good football team. Bo Nix looks like a different quarterback. They got a solid defense. Auburn has been a bit of a surprise this year, in my opinion. I think they've done a nice job to get to 5-2. Very tough schedule coming up for them, though. We'll see how that plays out. Number 4 is Kentucky. They lose their first game of the season to Georgia. But again, it's Georgia. Georgia's beating everybody. No one really expected Kentucky to win. They kept it closer than what Vegas thought. So, I mean, this was a decent performance from Kentucky. Their defense, I thought, played pretty well in this game. The offense didn't do a whole lot. But again, not many teams do much against this Georgia defense. So Kentucky there at number 4 at 6-1. Number 3 is Ole Miss at 5-1. I think you could put those 2 teams in really either order. Both teams have just 1 loss. Both teams lost to Alabama, Georgia, the top 2 teams in the SEC. Ole Miss has the win over Tennessee. That was a really nice win for them. And then also the win over Arkansas. So a couple of good wins. Kentucky has the wins over Florida, over LSU. So now that I'm kind of thinking about the actual resumes, Kentucky might actually deserve to be number 3. But when you look at the way that Ole Miss offense can score, I think that gives them a chance against anybody. And I personally think Ole Miss playing a little bit better right now. We also talk about power rankings being how the teams are playing right now, how they look in their last game, putting an emphasis on that. Yes, you look at the entire season, but it's how the teams just played. Ole Miss coming off a win, Kentucky coming off a loss. That really, I think, is what separates the teams for 3 and 4. But they're virtually tied at number 3, in my opinion. Number 2 is Alabama. They get back on track against Mississippi State, showing what they're capable of. They just didn't play very well against Texas A&M. You go back and watch that game, they had some bad penalties, they had some drops. The offensive line just didn't play well. Give Texas A&M credit for a great game plan. But we've seen this team at times look like they are as good as Georgia. Like they might be the best team in the country. It just hasn't been as consistent as Georgia. We'll see if that loss wakes them up and they can continue to play like they did against Mississippi State and against Ole Miss the rest of the season. The number 1 team, though, is Georgia. It's not even close. They are 7-0. No one's even challenged them. You can say that Clemson challenged them, but in my opinion, again, Georgia was just playing really conservative in that game. They didn't realize how bad Clemson was. If they had just went in there and played a normal game plan offensively, they probably would have scored a little bit, and the defense completely dominated against Clemson's offense. So Georgia really hasn't been challenged. They are clearly the best team in the SEC right now, best team in the country. And you look at the rest of the schedule, it's hard to imagine them losing a regular season game. Could Florida possibly shock the world, pull off an upset? Maybe, probably not, though. It's going to be all about the SEC championship for Georgia. That's the game that you can go ahead and pencil them into that game. And more than likely going to be playing Alabama, and it's more than likely going to be a fantastic game. Cannot wait for that one. But, of course, Alabama, they don't have it in the bag just yet. If they lose another game, if Texas A&M wins out, they would then go to the SEC championship. If Auburn could somehow win out, they would go. Ole Miss, if they win out and Alabama loses a game. So there are definitely different scenarios that could play out. It just kind of feels like the loss woke this Alabama team up, and you're going to see a different team the rest of the year, the team you saw against Mississippi State. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But again, Georgia, the number 1 team. Those are my power rankings heading into Week 8. How would you rank the teams? Give me your thoughts, your comments down below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on our SEC football channel.